Guys, and welcome to Just a Bit Outside, presented by WaFd Bank. Join a best bank at WAFDbank.com. I'm Michelle Ludtka, and we'll be joined by Aaron Levine here shortly, but I just wanted to say how excited we are to have you join us for our debut of our new digital show. Every Thursday, we will be bringing you the sports insight you've grown to know and expect from Q13, but with a little added flair. Instead of the X's and O's, we're taking a different approach, one that's just a bit outside the box. We'll have special guests, sit-downs with some of the biggest names in our community, plus plenty of little nuggets that you won't see anywhere else. All, of course, tied in with our local teams, because let's be real, sports is one of the few things that will always bring us together. So without further ado, let's get rolling. And we start by checking in on our big headlines for the week, brought to you by WaFd Bank. Get free checking at a best bank, WAFDbank.com. First up, Seahawks are back from their bye week. They are sitting at a 5-0 record as they head into Week 7 action. The Hawks are just one of 3 remaining undefeated teams in the NFL at this point in the year. Sunday, the Seahawks will take on the Cardinals in Arizona for their first divisional game of the season. Moving on from there, the Sounders have just 5 matches left in the regular season, including hosting their rivals, the Portland Timbers, tonight. Seattle goes into this match in first place in the Western Conference, but they are tied in points with the Timbers. Seattle, though, does have a game in hand on Portland. Still a lot on the line in tonight's match. And lastly, we're getting closer and closer to Kraken hockey becoming reality. Earlier this week, the organization made several key hires to their hockey operations department, including Michael Bowie as head athletic trainer, Gary Robert as the team sports science and performance consultant, and Jeff Camilio as the head equipment manager. So great to see that the organization is shaping up. Well, let's switch gears to a fun new segment where we get to hear from some of the biggest names in sports, entertainment, and broadcasting. And guess what? They are all weighing in on hot topics from around the sports world. This is From the Sidelines. This is From the Sidelines. As you guys can see, I'm joined by our very own Aaron Levine. Also, Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses is, for those of you who don't know, he is a diehard Seattle sports fan. I believe you even wrote for ESPN.com a while there too, Duff?
I absolutely did, yeah.
I love it. So you're more of an expert than me. And then, of course, we have Omar Ruiz from the NFL Network. For those of you who don't know or recognize him, he is a big-time Seahawks reporter. He actually, I mean, it's kind of one of those things. We see him all the time covering the Hawks and the NFC West, that he's at the VMAC during normal times almost just as much as you and me, Aaron.
It's amazing how often I've been up there. It's like Seattle's my home away from home. And obviously my tenure started during the same season that Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner came into the NFL. So obviously it's been a pretty good run there.
So much fun. So it's going to be so great to get your guys' insight from the sidelines. So let's just jump right in. Obviously, the World Series is going on right now. For us Seattle guys, Duff, you and me, I mean, it doesn't get much worse right now with rooting for the Mariners if we're ever going to get to a World Series. So I want to know, who are you guys rooting for in the World Series and why? Let's start with you, Omar.
Well, I'm a huge Dodger fan, and I know Aaron and I have kind of commiserated together several times over the last few years. We've also celebrated at times. But, you know, at first I thought this was going to be an unusual season with the 60 games and the different postseason, and I wouldn't be as emotional about it or follow it as closely. But here I am wrapped up in the postseason as diehard as I've ever been. And it's been cool to kind of see them, you know, go through. This is their 4th series now, this particular postseason. They got off to a good start in game 1, hoping that this is finally the year. And despite my initial reservations about it, I'm pretty happy and I'm pretty thrilled. And I would expect if they were to win it all, it'd be just as rewarding as it would have in a normal year.
Wouldn't that be something, guys, if the Lakers and the Dodgers won within weeks of each other at this time? I mean, I am from LA, as Omar mentioned. I'm not a huge Dodger fan in general. But I kind of feel like I owe it to them because the last time they won, I was only 6 years old, and I was actually rooting for the Oakland A's in that series because I liked Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco.
The Bash Brothers.
They were awesome, and I think it was my T-ball team also. But I'll never forget game 1 because my babysitter said I could stay up an extra hour if the A's won the game, but I had to go straight to sleep if they lost. And that is when Kirk Gibson hit that walk-off game-winning home run. I was so upset at the time. And frankly, they haven't won a World Series since. So I kind of feel personally responsible for that.
Yeah, for me, you brought up the Lakers, and I'm a Seahawk. I'm a Sonics fan for life, and we don't even have a team. So I still, I grew up to hate the Lakers, except for this year, and there was something about the Lakers that I was actually pulling for them, and the Dodgers. I spent a lot of time in LA and have since 1984. I'm a small market guy. I'm a Mariners guy. I'm a Sonics guy. We were small market here until, the Seahawks really, we won it all. Then all of a sudden we were on the map, So the Dodgers were always that big market team. So I kind of am pulling for Tampa Bay. And Zunino, it'd be great to see him go. He's a Mariner. But other than that, I got no dog in the fight.
Duff, will our Mariners ever get there?
We're always this close, this close. We're always rebuilding. This city would be on fire if we ever got close. I was here going to Seattle U when we won the 116 games, and then 9/11 happened, and that kind of, that the Yankees were the world's team at that point, of course. But this city was on fire when the Mariners do well, and it's not like we're a fair weather city as far as baseball, but it's been a long time with really, really bad baseball. I went to a game last year. It was like a minor league team. They were so bad, embarrassing. And I took some out of town friends, and a guy's Detroit Tigers fan, and he just looked at me. He's like, "Man, I'm sorry. I thought the Tigers were bad last year. The Mariners are really bad." And they're building. Again, there's always hope. I like the 60-game season like you, Omar. It was fun.
Well, let's be honest. The Mariners players do get to the World Series, just not when they're on the Mariners. It's after they leave Seattle and go somewhere else. 19 years without the postseason. So hopefully let's just get to the playoffs first and then the World Series. We saw glimpses this year with Kyle Lewis and Evan White. I'm just not sold on their pitching just yet. Marco Gonzalez is good. I'm not sure about the whole rotation, but hopefully we're just going to have to wait for this, 5-year plan through the Mariners organization like we tend to do every 5 years. But hopefully this is the first time that it's actually going to work.
You remember those iconic images of the 95 series and Ken Griffey Jr. scoring the decisive runs and just how crazy the Kingdome was and what an awesome setting that was. And obviously in this era of Seahawks football, we've seen how crazy CenturyLink Field can be and what a dominant home field advantage the Seahawks have enjoyed. And I just only imagine, as beautiful as Safeco Field is, I think it's still called that. Forgive me if it's not. But as beautiful as that ballpark is, can you imagine the electricity and the atmosphere if they had a good team there that we've seen at Seahawks that we saw in the Kingdome? I think it's something that all of us as baseball fans would hope to see one day and hopefully relatively soon, for the folks in Seattle.
Shout out to T-Mobile. It's now T-Mobile Park, but no one will hold that against you, Omar, whatsoever, because it is a beautiful stadium. And speaking of stadiums, we're only seeing fans in a couple of them right now when we look to the NFL, and unfortunately we're not there yet at CenturyLink Field. I'm interested on your take on this, guys. Do you think it's fair for the league, for the teams, for the fans, that in some cities you can go to a game and in other ones you can't?
No, it's not fair. But I think that's, from the NFL perspective, heading into training camp, that was the message, that there are going to be components to this season that aren't going to be fair. And thought somewhat with players, a guy like Cam Newton, tested positive, and obviously that changes the dynamic of the Patriots team. And, you had some sort of lesser known players of the Titans that tested positive. And obviously that's the balance and the scale of the players that were missing weren't equal, but they were treated the same. And obviously the fan participation in the stadiums is another component. To your question, Michelle, it's not fair, but I think everybody by and large is doing what they have to do to make sure we have games, whether there's fans there or not. And I think we all enjoy the fact that at least we could watch them on TV.
And they've done a really good job of making it a really good TV product, if you will. Like the crowd sounds and all of that. It is great. And I'm just happy football is back. I'm not able to tour. We were supposed to be playing some of these places over the summer. And who knows when that's going to happen for us. But just being able to see these teams play, that's good enough for me. I don't care about fair or not fair. Just play the games.
It's not fair to the fans, but it's fair to the teams. I don't think it's a huge difference if there are 15 or 20,000 fans in the stands. I mean, in the Seahawks case, they're at a point where they almost do as well on the road as they do at home. I mean, talk about the CenturyLink Field advantage. Well, the Seahawks are 7-1 on the road last year, 2-0 on the road this year. They've won 9 of their last 10 games away from CenturyLink Field. So I think it's sad that fans can't be there, but absolutely at this point, I don't think it has much of an effect.
Amen to that. And I think the result of that is all the scoring that we've seen, in that, it's not as difficult to play on the road, because you said, Aaron, even when there's 22,000 fans, it is not nearly as disruptive as the 70,000 or whatever, that particular stadium would hold.
And I'm sure all of us fantasy football players are totally enjoying the high scoring games and the high points, because this season is my season where I have scored the most points of any time in fantasy football. So I'll keep that going for me. But kind of switching gears, we were talking about fans and game day and stuff, and Duff, you talked about the broadcast, and I have to say one of the parts of the broadcast I enjoy the most is when you get to see the players arrive. I love to see what they're wearing, and every time it's kind of like, which direction are they going to take this? And so I'm curious your take on, obviously this has kind of exploded a little bit more in the days now of social media, but Duff, like when you're touring and playing with your band, like, do you guys have fashion consultants? Is that a big deal of like what you're going to be arriving in? Is there any like time that you remember being like, dude, what are you wearing?
No fashion consultants. I don't know if you've seen what I wear on stage. It's a ripped up T-shirt and jeans, and high top Air Jordans. That's it. That's my uniform. But yeah, sure. There was a day when I think when I started making a couple dollars, I didn't know what, I'll buy this red jacket. Sure. And I'm colorblind. I buy something else. And I remember showing up a couple times. And when Matt Sorum came into the band in like 91, he was not colorblind. And he would let me know that I was probably not wearing the right stuff. I didn't care. I didn't take any advice, but.
I love it. Omar, I mean, are you going to the games? Like, what is your, and not even just this year, but when you see some of these players, are you kind of like, okay, I'm taking note. I like that, because I mean, us as TV folk, we have to unfortunately pay attention to what we're wearing.
It's funny, sometimes I see some of the outfits that the players wear, and I think, gosh, that looks so cool. But then my second thought is, gosh, I can never pull that off. So it's kind of like, teasing me with what sort of is stylish nowadays and what's in fashion, but something that I'm honest with myself, and I don't think I can pull off looking as cool as some of these guys do. I'm a little disappointed, though. I wanted to see Cam Newton's outlandish wardrobe in New England. So far, from what I recall, we haven't really seen too much of what we saw in Carolina, but to compare Cam Newton's wardrobe with Bill Belichick's, certainly a clash of styles there. Maybe, going forward and everything returns a little bit to normal, we'll start to see that in the future.
Hey, Duff, are we going to see Guns N' Roses at the new arena at Seattle Center? Are we going to see, what's going to come first, that or a Kraken game that you attend?
What's the other one? Second choice?
You attending a Kraken game.
Oh, a Kraken game. No. Okay, first of all, the new arena, we were supposed to play, is it T-Mobile now?
It's T-Mobile, yes.
It was like September 2nd or something, and that night came, we were here in Seattle, and my neighbor let me know. He's like, oh, you were supposed to play the baseball field tonight. I'm like, oh. The new arena is supposed to sound great, like they did with the Forum down in LA. A lot of arenas now are getting on board with making the places sound good, because a lot of bands come through there, and that makes a lot of money for them. So hopefully that arena will sound good. Key Arena was not a favorite building to play of any band, any artist. It sounded horrible. Kraken game. My wife is from Ohio. She grew up in Bowling Green. I think she grew up an ice skater. She either was going to go model in Paris or go try out for the Ice Capades. So she went and modeled in Paris.
Wow.
That sounds like my youth.
Right. Yeah.
I have either one of those choices in my life.
She had both. But she's super down with the Kraken. She's like, we have to get season tickets. I'm like, well, we might be on the road. We'll get some tickets. We'll go to some games for sure. And I'm really, we never had hockey here growing up. So on a scale that drew my interest at least. So this will be something.
I was going to say, speaking of shows and stadiums and everything, I saw Duff and GNR at Dodger Stadium about 4 years ago, which was, one of the best shows I saw. I don't know what Dodger Stadium is like, Duff, for you guys acoustically and everything, but it was a hell of a show, man. And for everybody out there who, maybe hasn't seen a show of Duff and over the years, highly recommend it. They still bring it. The energy is awesome. And I couldn't have been more thrilled seeing you guys there.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it feels like to me, like the energy's way more than it ever has been, just because I think we're fitter, we're more together, we're in the game. We're not. Personally, I'm not on the sauce and the drug. Completely different thing. But
sure.
I don't know. I was gonna get off tour about now, and we were back in Seattle full time. We did a remodel of our house, and it's finally done. And so I was looking forward to getting 7 Seahawks games in.
Mm-hmm.
But
hopefully in 2021, we'll see you, Duff, raising that 12th man flag again. That's what I am rooting for. Guys, thank you so much for giving us your insight and everything from the sidelines, being a part of our debut segment on our debut show. Duff, Omar, Aaron, really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so
thanks
much
for having us. This was awesome.
And a big thanks again to Duff and Omar for joining Aaron and me. Now, you might know him from his time on Better Late Than Never or his appearance on The Masked Singer. But did you know that comedian Jeff Dye is a die-hard Seattle sports fan? And when he's not busy traveling the globe performing, he's catching all the games he can. Well, I caught up with the Kent native earlier today.
Jeff, thank you so much, for taking the time and joining me today. It's so good to see you. It's been a while, especially given all these COVID times. How have you been doing? How have you been holding up? Have you been able to work, do your comedy?
It's good to see you as well. I love what you've done with the place. It looks very nice. All your jerseys and your Emmy, it's a strong flex. Even the husband, I like that he made the cut on that wall. That makes me very happy. I've been working really hard. I've been doing good. I have 2 podcasts, and then I basically just been doing stand-up wherever they'll let me. I did a pop-up show in a park in San Diego. I've done drive-ins, where people park their cars and they listen through the radio. I go to places where they're not as serious about COVID, like Salt Lake City and Phoenix and San Antonio and Appleton, Wisconsin. So the places who are just we're at a different level of safety than the Californians. So I've just been working wherever they'll let me. Sometimes I'll just pop in and be like, hey, do you mind if I do some comedy? And they're like, sir, this is a restaurant. So no, but basically just anywhere they'll let me.
That's good to hear. You mentioned your podcast, one of which has a very famous Seahawk tied to it. You are co-hosting Danger Talk with the one and only Russell Wilson. How did that all come about?
First of all, it's awesome. And it's Russ's podcast. I want to make that very clear. It's called it's called Danger Talk, which is a play on Danger Russ. Real blessing for me that he even included me on doing this. And I can't even tell you how or why I'm on the podcast. Not that I'm not good on the podcast, but how that happened, no clue. Russ literally called me out of the blue. We're pals. I've known him since I did a TV show on NBC with Sierra called I Can Do That. And so we've been friendly. Last time I saw you was at Russ's golf tournament. And Sierra's the best. She's one of the only celebrities who actually replies to my texts. And so I'm sure that when Russell said hey, I'm going to start a podcast, that I imagine Sierra was like, you should have Jeff do it with you, because not only do I already do podcasts, but I get to be silly and have fun. Russ is a very serious guy. If you follow his Twitter, it's Bible verses, hard work, and inspiration. There's not a lot of yucks. So I think that's kind of what I bring to the table, is that I'm the lighter side. And also my goal is to try to bring out the sides of Russ that maybe you've gotten to see and I've gotten to see, but the fans don't get to see. I think sometimes people think Russ is he's this machine or this kind of like success and football robot, but he has like a very fun side, and he's a great guy, and he's a father, and he's a stepfather, and he's a cool guy, and he's a friend. He says curse words sometimes. He's human. And so that's the goal of this podcast, is to try and show everyone the Russell that is not just he's not just Black Tom Brady. Like, this guy, he's crushing it.
Jeff, you always crack me up. So you kind of mentioned a little bit about what comes out of Russ and you and whatnot, but you guys have had some really fun guests so far. I mean, Matthew McConaughey this week. What has it been like kind of bringing in those different personalities, and kind of what would people expect if they tuned in to your podcast?
So one thing that I don't know if it's getting enough advertising, because since it's on ESPN, it feels like it has a heavy sports side to it, and I'm trying my best to get away from that. I think there's enough places in the world to find Russell talking about sports. Russell has spent every single episode talking about his heart, talking about his motivation, talking about his family, and so the guests have been really great that way. We've had Shaq, John David Washington, Randy Moss, Chris Paul, Candace Parker, Ken Griffey Jr., Matthew McConaughey, and next week we have Joe Montana. And so, although the majority of those are sports people, including John David Washington, who was drafted by the Rams, but what they spend most of the time talking about, and what we spend most time talking about, is success, family stuff, insecurities. We've talked about Black Lives Matter on almost every single episode. We talked about police, because Shaq is a police officer, so we've talked about that on episode 1. So there's actually a lot of like political stuff, and a lot of heavy stuff, and a lot of sweet stuff. I like going, more silly stuff. Like, I ask, silly things, like Matthew McConaughey, are you barefoot right now? Or, those kind of like silly things. So I try to lighten it up a little bit. We try to go heavy, light, and we're still maneuvering that. But yeah, that's the gist of it. It's not always sports, and I'm very grateful for that.
Was Matthew McConaughey barefoot?
He was barefoot, I was barefoot, and Russ was barefoot.
Perfect.
And we didn't plan it.
But are you barefoot now?
I'm not. I have got some. This actually is a famous athlete's shoes that I'm not allowed to reveal how, where, or what athlete's shoes I'm wearing. But it's actually a good story. I'll tell you in.
Intrigue. We'll
he got jacked.
Whoa! We'll move on from that one. But you, obviously, being from Kent originally, you're a diehard Seattle sports fan. Do you have a favorite team?
I am all Seattle, all sports. And that's the first question we ask every guest to say, because Russ knows I'm a big Seattle guy, and of course he's a Seattle guy. So we always ask the guest, who's your team? And we haven't had a single person say Seattle except Ken Griffey Jr. He's the only person. And I'm actually surprised Ken Griffey Jr. said it, because he grew up, so Virginia, so Cincinnati, so, his dad's legacy. Even when he played in Seattle, I felt like Seattle wasn't his favorite team. So it was actually refreshing to hear that Griffey loves the Seahawks and loves Russell Wilson. But besides Griffey, nobody said Seattle on our podcast. But I'm the biggest. I'm like Mariners my whole life, ever since I was a little boy. Like, I think at my school, Crestwood Elementary, I think at that age, and you could ask classmates, like, I think I was the first person to always be rocking Mariners stuff, like even in kindergarten and first grade. At my age, which I won't tell what it is, it was always 49ers and Green Bay and the Cowboys. Like, they all wore the same crap. And I was like the only kid that's like, no, these are our teams. Like, we're supposed to root for our teams. And so I was kind of ahead of the curve on being the diehard fan. And since that became part of my identity so young, I've just, it's ingrained in me. You root for Seattle. Even when I moved to Los Angeles, I was a season ticket holder for the Clippers, and I wouldn't wear Clippers stuff. I would just wear street clothes. And people would be like, you've got fantastic seats at the Staples Center. Why aren't you like wearing Clippers stuff? And I was like, I'm a Seattle guy. Just wait until the Sonics come back. And then more recently, I've been recruited by the Lakers. I'm good friends with Jeannie Buss, and she's like, stop going to those Clipper games. Come be a Lakers fan. And she told me that about 5 years ago. So since I've converted, and that's why I'm Mr. Laker now until the Sonics come back.
Until the Sonics come back. So I want to know, do you already have your Kraken tickets then lined up? Are you going to be a hockey guy too when that starts?
I'm excited to become a hockey. I've always wanted to be a hockey fan, but I never had a dog in the fight. So it's hard to get carried away if you don't have a team. And the Canucks, you know, they're too far. I know that some Seattle people are like, oh, Vancouver, it's the closest, but that's like rooting for the Trailblazers. It doesn't feel like home to me. It feels too far. But I'm so excited about the Krakens. And if anybody from the Krakens watches this or hears this, yo, step up the gear. I want to buy a Krakens jersey. I want to buy a Krakens like new era like fitted hat, and they only have like floppy dad hats and like t-shirt jerseys and like some crappy sweatshirt where the symbol's just been sewn up. I want some good gear, and I'm gonna spend a lot of money when that gear's ready.
All right, we gotta let the Kraken know that Jeff Dye needs his gear. I love it.
I'm ready.
You're ready. But you mentioned Mariners earlier, and you know, we're in the midst of the World Series. You and I are both born and raised local people here. Are we ever going to be able to cheer on our team in the World Series?
I have such a love-hate relationship with these Seattle Mariners. And and my whole thing is positivity. I'm a smiley, happy man. I always have been, even when I was a kid. How long are we supposed to just hear rebuilding? I've heard the term rebuilding forever, and then we get some star, and then we get some pop, and then we get a no-hitter, and then a guy, whatever, and it's always rebuilding. It's just rebuilding, and it's very, very frustrating. I don't know. I'm sure you know this, but we're the only team who's never even been to a World Series, and we've only been to the playoffs 3 or 4 times, I think, in our entire franchise history. And something I read like a few weeks ago was like, we're the losingest team in sports history. Do you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I was like, well, not the Browns. And they're like, no, you're more losing than the Browns. And I don't know how they come up with those numbers with statistically, like for how many games and losses and playoff berths for how long your franchise is. But whatever that algorithm is or whatever that formula was, we're the losingest team in all of sports, not just baseball, but all of sports. It's humiliating.
But on the bright side, we have one hell of a stadium. It is so beautiful. And I know you always hit up games when you can and there's no COVID. And you actually threw out a first pitch there. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you have like a mission, right, behind first pitches in Major League Baseball. Tell me a little bit about that.
So my old goal was to, I think a lot of men have this goal, and some, I've met women that haven't, but it seems like every guy I ever talked to is like, dude, I want to go to every baseball stadium. Like that's like a father-son kind of goal or like a brother goal. And I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to every stadium, you know. And so I was able to do that so quickly because I travel America for comedy. I was able to check that off so quickly that I did it all in one season. I went to every Major League park in one season. So I was like, well, I need to step the goal up. And I'd only thrown out a first pitch in Seattle because I was doing a Comedy Central Presents, and my manager at the time was able to like call Seattle and be like, hey, you know, he's a Seattle guy. It's a no-brainer. He's doing a Comedy Central thing. He's got a show on MTV. Like, and they were super cool. Let me throw out a first pitch. It was awesome. Shout out to Kevin Martinez. But then since since my career has gotten a little broader and a little bit more international, we reach out to these teams, and now my new goal is to throw out a first pitch at every Major League Baseball stadium. And I've already checked off 9. And then if you count minor league, I've done heaps. But I'm trying to do every Major League Baseball stadium throwing out a first pitch. That's my goal.
I love it. I hope you get there. That is so awesome. But I got to know, do you have like the form all dialed in? Do you have like a specialty pitch that you go with each time? Or do you mix it up depending on like what ballpark you're at and who's catching you?
That's a great question. Do you golf, Michelle?
I do.
Okay, so I don't know how good you are at golf. I'm okay.
I'm not very good. I'm good at the drinking and the driving range part.
Hey, then we're the same. We should golf together because that's my stuff. So with golf, what happens is you hit a ball straight and far and you go, all right, yeah, I got it. And then the next time you hit it, you're like, oh, I'm dialed in. This is it. I figured out my swing. And then you just chunk it for the next 3. And then you make an adjustment and you hit one straight and you're like, no, now I've got it. Now I've got it. I was taking my eye off the ball. Now I have it. And then you chunk the next one. So it's like, same with these first pitches for me. Every time I throw one good, I'm like, oh, I'm in it. I'm in the zone. I got this. And then I'll just skip one right across the dirt, like behind the catcher, like in Kansas City or whatever. And so I always think I've got it. And then something happens. And also some of these parks don't let you warm up. They just hand you a baseball and they're like, all right, let's go on out there. And you're like, I don't get to warm up at all. The best pitch I had was in Cleveland. I threw a curveball. I was like, I'm gonna throw a curveball. And so like I got up there and I threw it and it just went 12-6, just like a perfect curveball. And the guy that caught it was a backup pitcher for the Indians. He came up to me, he's like, did you throw a curveball? And I was like, yeah, I did throw a curveball. And my friends were like losing their mind. They all videotaped it on the big screen because they were impressed that I could throw a curveball. And then one of my friends, Randy, he's like, dude, that means you could like probably pitch in Major League Baseball. And I was like, no, dude, it went across at like 60 miles. Like they would hit the heck out of that ball. Like if you had me pitching, sure, it moved, but like they would crush that. So it was pretty cool. But that was my best pitch for sure, with the curveball.
I love it. That is so fantastic. And I mean, when you look back, obviously, so many amazing moments for you through your career, what you've been able to experience as a sports fan and growing up here. But do you have a favorite all-time Seattle sports memory?
You know, I'm trying to think. So my instinct is to say, when Ken Griffey Jr. slid across home plate and they all jumped on him and Edgar got the double. That's my instinct. But the truth is, we just went to the playoffs. You can't call that the miracle year that we limped into the playoffs. Like we actually had to do a one-game playoff just to get to that part. And so anyways, that as magic as that was to me, because I was in 5th grade and it was just this cool, like over the top, like kind of fun thing that happened. I think that my best one was just watching the Seattle Seahawks win the Super Bowl in New York. I remember when I used to wait tables and the Seahawks went to the first Super Bowl against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Super Bowl XL. I remember thinking, man, because I knew some rich guys that came to the bar I worked at who were going. And I was like, man, how much did you spend? And they're like, oh, well, we got tickets for like this many thousand. And then the hotel is this much thousand. And then we got to get a car, which is hundreds. And I remember thinking, even if I had that much money, I couldn't spend it on a ticket to go see us. You know, like I was processing this in my mind. And it kind of came to the realization, like, I'm never going to be able to see a Super Bowl. Like, I'm just like a regular guy who's broke, who waits tables. And so luckily I've been very blessed and my career has been very, very, I'm so happy and grateful for that when the Seahawks went to the Super Bowl, I was like, oh man, I have money. And so my girlfriend at the time actually bought me tickets to the Super Bowl, 4 tickets. We were row 2 on the 48-yard line. It was insane. And so to be with someone I liked very much, her and my best friend who I loved, and then to watch the Seahawks not just win the Super Bowl, but obliterate the Denver Broncos. And I had like a beer in a hand and a girl and my best friend, and I'm just watching the confetti cut. It was literally, that's my favorite Seattle moment thus far.
You literally just gave me chills because I remember watching it all too, and that was just top.
It was magic.
Top. It was magic. It was magic.
And that's the highest. You know, it wasn't like the Mariners just, you know, making Jim Leyritz sad walking to the dugout. It was literally like, we won. We finally won. And of course the Storm, you know, God bless them. They've won some championships, which is awesome. And then also our Sonics before I was born in the 70s. But to witness the first Seahawks Super Bowl victory was unmatched.
Jeff, thank you. Before we go, where can people find you? Find out what you're doing and follow you and see your podcasts and hopefully see you in person too if they're in a state that allows it or at a park.
Yeah.
Or
I'm the easiest guy to find. You just type JEFFDYE, Jeff Dye. All my handles for social medias are at Jeff Dye. My website's jeffdye.com. Very easy. So if you just search Jeff Dye, I'll pop up. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in Charlie soon. I miss you guys.
Yeah, we miss you too, Jeff. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you. Bye, Michelle. Love you.
Aaron Levine joining me now. And Aaron, it's so great to talk sports with the hometown kid. And I don't know about you, but if you have not seen him in person doing his comedy stand-up, you got to. He's so funny.
I think we just got 15 minutes of it there, Michelle. That was awesome. By the way, Jeff Dye had better seats than we did at the Super Bowl 49. And 30 ballparks in a single summer. People go their entire lives trying to get to every single ballpark in Major League Baseball. I'm jealous.
He lives a miraculous life. Now, this next segment is one that Aaron and I have been talking about for years because every week We spend hours listening in and taking part in press conferences and interviews, and then we have the hard task of narrowing that sound down to fit just into our sportscasts. But not anymore. Finally, we can bring you all of the uncut, unheard gems that we've been wanting to share with you.
Yeah, we like to call it Emerald City Extras, and I'll say Mike Holmgren was the king of this. Every press conference sort of turned into stories with Mike. But Pete Carroll does it every once in a while also, and this one was about penalties, and the one penalty he would have been really happy to get.
I think the last Rose Bowl that I was coaching in, the media had said that SC didn't want to, didn't care about playing in the Rose Bowl. They've been there so many times, and it wasn't that big a deal, and they were just doing it, and everything they were saying about it was just made up and all that, and it really pissed me off that they didn't understand what they were talking about, and so because we did love going to that game, so I made a big deal to the team during the process of getting ready for the game. That we were going to have as much fun as you could possibly have at a football game and on the sidelines. And so everybody was going to be in it, and we were all going to be cheering for one another and going crazy and celebrating and all that, which is no big deal, except for as we're coming out from halftime, the referee came to me and said, if you guys continue to celebrate like that on the sidelines, we're going to have to penalize you. I thought that was the greatest thing I ever heard, that we were having so much fun that they're going to throw a flag on us.
Now, the deal is this. Pete Carroll is all about competing, and if you ever think he or any of his players aren't going to be motivated or excited to be part of a game, let alone the Rose Bowl, you're absolutely crazy.
So true, Aaron. I mean, this man, I don't think anyone loves competing as much as Pete Carroll, and that is when he is having his most fun, when they are literally firing on all cylinders. Hopefully, him and the Seahawks just keep doing that now in this next chapter of his life. But next up is a bite that I love so much. I can't begin to tell you how often viewers ask us about our team access and why sometimes it's limited, or why we can't report certain things or don't have video of certain things. And that's pretty much all has to do with the teams really trying to protect their teams. In his first meeting, I should say, with the media after fall camp started, Huskies head football coach Jimmy Lake was asked about a player's injury status, and he had this to say.
I wish all of us could have had a good sit down in the spring, because if we didn't discuss all these injury stuff, guess what? You guys could stay at practice for the whole 2 hours, just so you guys know. That would be great for us. But as soon as you guys report stuff like that, then that's really the biggest reason why you guys are only allowed for 20 minutes. But if you guys wanted to be at practice every single day for 2 hours and didn't report on stuff like that, you could watch all the team drills. You could see which quarterbacks are doing what. That doesn't help us. That helps our opponents when you guys report on stuff like that. And so, we'll keep that in-house. We're not going to report on anything like that ever.
Michelle, that's kind of the conundrum that we as sports journalists have, because when you're there and you see something, you want to report it. And so that's the reason why many of these teams, including UW and Jimmy Lake, simply close practice off, because that doesn't give the reporters that conflict of interest there. Okay, we can see what's going on in practice, but we're not able to report any injuries we see. Doesn't make sense.
Absolutely, and it's a very interesting development with practices. We also see it with the Seahawks, and I think that has to do a lot with the advent of social media and how readily available information is today. And I think you said it best, Aaron. It by them doing this, it prevents us from having to have a conflict of interest, which is great, and we'll thank them for that. Now, lastly tonight, this was one of the most meaningful sound bites that I heard during the post press conference interviews following the Seattle Storm's 4th WNBA championship win. Now, we must remember that this is a league, and these players were the first to commit to the Black Lives Matter movement, and they never faltered, dedicating their season to Breonna Taylor, and that was not forgotten even in the end.
We have women out here fighting for the voice of Black women in this country, and so to be able to come out here tonight and win this, it's a championship for little Black girls and Black women across this country. Honestly, I said it after the game when I was letting it all soak in. Like, I hope each and every one of them feel just as victorious in this moment as I do. Because you should. We see you, we hear you, we acknowledge you, and your life matters, and that was what the season was about. So to be able to win a championship with that message, with that on our minds, man, it's special and really historic. I'm so honored and so thankful to be a part of that.
You know, Sue Bird also said something really similar to that, and here's what I love. There is no holding back anymore. For better or worse, you're getting full transparency from these athletes, and whether you agree with their platforms or not, they're committed to setting the example for younger generations, as Alicia Clark said just now.
It's an absolutely beautiful thing to see, Aaron. It's like, again, if you agree with it or you not, how can you not root for people living their truth both on and off the court or field or whatever their means of playing is. So really love that. I was glad we were able to bring that to you guys. And Aaron, we'll check back in with you a little bit later. And folks, make sure to check out Emerald City Extras every week because you never know really what you're going to hear. Now, if any of you tune in regularly to Q It Up Sports, you know that we have a nightly trivia segment. Now, probably a little less known is that our very own Aaron Levine is actually a huge Jeopardy fan and loves trivia. So in a brand new segment, we pit you, our viewers, against Aaron. So with the help of Jessamine McIntyre, here's On the Clock with Aaron Levine.
It's now time for a chance for a viewer or follower on social media to beat me in a trivia challenge we like to call On the Clock. Tonight we've got Allison Woods, one of our loyal viewers who is also on Twitter. You also work at sporting events too, right? Where do you work, Allison?
I worked at the Key Arena until they closed for the remodel, and I work live events in the normal non-COVID time, so I hope to see you all mask up for now, and we'll do concerts and conferences and shows in the near future, hopefully.
Yeah, this time next year, hopefully at Climate Pledge Arena. I'm also told that Allison and her husband hosted a trivia night in Greenwood for a number of years. Is that right?
That's right. We raised money for the Greenwood Food Bank until it went under. We tried.
At least it was for a good cause. I'm kind of nervous tonight, given your history and background. Here is how it works. Both of us will have a minute each to answer as many trivia questions as possible. If you beat me outright, you're going to win a $100 gift card to Daniel's Broiler. While you're going, I'm going to turn my volume down. I've also got some elevator music here. I'm going to play some Tom Petty. I'll show you it's actually going on right now. Okay. You're going to have to signal to me when it's my turn, okay?
Will do.
Okay. Jessamine McIntyre standing by off camera. Again, Scout's honor. I will not be able to hear anything. I'm turning my volume down right now. Jessamine.
Okay, Allison Woods, you are officially on the clock. A hot dog topped with Seattle with,
cream cheese.
Yes! What team ended the Seahawks 2012 season with a 30-28 playoff win?
2012. I can't remember. San Francisco.
What was the world's first national park designated in 1872?
Yellowstone.
The River Nile flows through Egypt and what other country?
The one just south of it.
What do the M&M in M&M stand for?
Mars and my mom.
What multi-platinum recording artist shares their name with a trucking company?
With a what company?
Trucking company.
Trucking company?
Yes.
Mumford & Sons.
Without taking inflation into account, what is the highest grossing film of all time?
Star Wars.
Which Williams sister has won more Grand Slam titles?
Serena.
What year did Washington become a state?
1889.
Who was the first coach of the Seattle Sonics?
George Washington.
All right, we did well that time. We have 5 correct answers on the board.
Aaron.
Okay, I'm turning my computer back up right now. So I can hear you. I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty is going right now. I'm going to turn him off. Okay, let's do this.
Okay, Allison has 5 correct answers on the board right now. Aaron,
Yep.
You are on the clock. A hot dog topped with cream cheese is known as?
Seattle Dog.
What team ended the Seahawks 2012 season with a 30-28 playoff defeat?
Pass.
What was the world's first national park designated in 1872?
Yellowstone.
The River Nile flows through Egypt and what other country?
Sudan.
What did the M&M in M&M stand for?
Pass.
What multi-platinum recording artist shares their name with a trucking company?
Pass.
Without taking inflation into account, what is the highest grossing film of all time?
Avengers Endgame.
Which Williams sister has won more Grand Slam titles?
Serena.
What year did Washington become a state?
1889.
Who was the first coach of the Seattle Supersonics?
Pass.
What former U.S. State Secretary of the Treasury was the subject of a Broadway musical?
Hamilton.
And that'll do it. Sorry, Allison, he got to that last one. I knew that was an easy one, but he got to it, and we ran out of time. So, Aaron, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh.
6 correct answers. You won by just 1 vote, but congratulations to both of you for the trivia challenge.
Allison, thank you very much for playing. We got an awesome Q13 coffee mug for you also. Thank you so much for playing. You gave me a run for my money. Hopefully we'll be seeing each other in person at a game sooner than later.
I'm coming back for a rematch, Aaron Levine.
I can't wait to have you on.
Again, the answer is a hot dog with cream cheese is a Seattle dog. The Falcons ended the Hawks season in 2012. I should have known that. Yellowstone, the first national park. The Nile River goes through about 10 countries, but we were going through for Sudan there. M&M stands for Mars and Murray. Taylor Swift and Swift trucking in that one. Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing movie. Serena has won more Grand Slam titles than Venus. Washington became a state in 1889. Al Bianchi, the first coach of the Sonics, and Alexander Hamilton, which means I now can't get the soundtrack out of my head. Michelle?
At least it's really good music, Aaron. I mean, that's just so much fun. How do you not love just having Hamilton roll through your head? And anyway, it was great trivia segment. Great job, Allison. Thanks so much for being a part of On the Clock. Now, if you at home want to take on Aaron and be a part of On the Clock, just head over to Twitter and send a note to Aaron at AaronQ13Fox for your chance to join us on the show. And we've got an action-packed week ahead of us, Aaron. The NFL, college football, well, not here locally, but it is happening elsewhere in the country. And, of course, the World Series. So many fun games to watch and bet on, of course.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks before the Pac-12 gets going in college football. Sports betting was legalized back in March. Soon we'll be able to place bets inside tribal casinos when they get their sports books set up. So we're getting ahead of it all with our weekly picks. Now, my best advice here, I'm not very good at this. So this week, here we go. I'm going to take the Giants plus the 4.5 points against the Eagles. I actually think the Eagles will win this game, but it is a divisional game, and I don't like any team in the NFC East to cover a spread right now. I'm sorry, but Clemson can't be that good, and Syracuse can't be that bad. So I'm going to take the orange and 46 points, hoping the final score is not 51-3. So that's going to be Clemson. I'm not taking Clemson. I'm taking Syracuse plus 46 against Clemson. The Big Ten openers are this weekend, so I'm going to take the home dogs with Purdue plus 3 points against Iowa. And on Sunday, I'm taking the Saints and laying the points. I just don't believe in Carolina right now, and I think Baker Mayfield and company gets back on the winning track at Cincinnati. I'm going to lay the 3.5 points, taking the Cleveland Browns. And you'll also know that I'm terrible at this because I gave picks that are laying 7.5 points and laying 3.5 points, which I believe is the worst thing you can do as a sports bettor, because 3 and 7 are the most important numbers. So, Michelle, if I go 0-5 for the first week, we might consider scrapping this segment altogether.
Regardless, Aaron, I know that you will be doing better than me because I just blind picking. That's how I do. But anyway, thank you for the insight there. And that does it really for us. Episode 1 is in the books. What did you think? We'd love to hear from you. You can always find me at Twitter at Michelle Ludtka. But thanks for joining us for Just a Bit Outside, presented by WaFd Bank. Join a best bank. And a huge thanks to Duff McKagan, Omar Ruiz, and Jeff Dye for being a part of our production. For Aaron Levine, I'm Michelle Ludtka. We'll see you the same time, same spot next week.